How did education get captured by radical ideologies? This is the final part of a 3-part series. It is recommended that you view parts 1 and 2 before viewing. Links to the series preview and parts 1 and 2 are in the video description, along with reference links to the material presented.
So, cultural Marxism in schools, transforming Irish education. Let's play this first.
Stalin is very much aware of one of communism's primary objectives, to capture the minds and hearts of the young. Now he gives great attention to the Komsomol, the Young Communist League, whose aim is to link every step in the training and education of youth to the class struggle, the victory over the non-communist people of the earth. Now the world begins to learn the truth about communism. Family ties are discouraged. The state is supreme. Translation: religion is the opiate of the people. Religious satires are staged throughout the Soviet Union. Atheism continues to be the official state doctrine. Communism instructs its people, never forget the clergy are the greatest enemies of the Soviet state. If you are not a convinced atheist, you cannot be a good communist and Soviet citizen. Atheism is inseparable from communism. Teachers find that 40% of their course is made up of indoctrinational studies. Indoctrinators are guided by Lenin's instruction, children must be taught to hate their parents if these are not communists.
Children are taught to hate their parents if they're not woke, as you saw in the video at the very start. We have parents in our group, the international group, who have lost their children. Their children are estranged from them, they've gone no contact because they think their parents are bigoted, they're far right, they're transphobic. You carry a child for 9 months, you raise them, and you send them into school, and 4 or 5 years later, you don't know what they are because they're talking a different language, they've got different values from you. It's horrendous. So warning signs. So the warning signs that I saw was this statement from Dr. Aoife from UL, and she uses this language, critical consideration of sexuality as intersectional and caught up in broader power relations. That's critical theory language. That's what that comes from. Critical, the word critical, we'll talk about that in a bit more. And you see this Paulo Freire, the politics of education. So this whole notion of critical pedagogy, we'll get into that. So that's why I have that book there. And then the move from overemphasis on risk. There is no risk assessment on the books, on the courses, on the fact that Belong To come in to do a stand-up week. There's no risk. That's how they bypass the risk assessment. We just don't do it anymore. And secondly, I propose children and young people are more heavily in co-construction. Co-construction, that example that Jana gave of the child bringing up this discussion on fisting and rimming in the classroom, that was a child that brought up that issue. That child might have been watching porn and saw something on a porn video or something and brings it up in the classroom. The parents have no awareness that was going to be brought up in the classroom. It's not written in the curriculum. It's what they call a generative theme under critical pedagogy. It then gets discussed openly in the classroom under a class contract. So the children are told not to say anything at home, that was discussed, privately in the classroom. It's brought up with one of the other children. See what's going on? You don't even know what was discussed in the classroom anymore. And that could have happened in an English class. It doesn't have to happen in an SPHE class because of the whole school approach. This is subversion on a level like we've never seen. Now, I'm not saying every teacher in Ireland is engaged in this right now. They're not, because the IJA are going to have to indoctrinate all our teachers to teach this way. And that's going to take a few years. In Maoist China, it took them 2 or 3 years to either get rid of teachers who wouldn't conform or indoctrinate the other teachers to do the job that they wanted to do. So we have a lot of good teachers today, but IJA, a lot of our good teachers want to get out of the profession. They just want to get away because they don't want to teach this stuff. They don't want to be caught up in this stuff. And this is happening in every Western country. The same thing, because it's all the same theories. All those critical theories are in every Western country. So here's more from her statement.
Firstly, we must take account of how fears around childhood innocence act as a barrier in ways that don't account for the capabilities of children or the wants of parents. To be effective, comprehensive RSE must begin in early years, from as young as 3, in partnership with parents.
Uncertainties regarding religious ethos, right? We need to bypass the religious ethos. And then this whole school approach, see it there? She refers to it. This was 2018. When I saw this memo at the time, my alarm bells went off. I didn't understand all the language. I didn't know about critical theory and queer theory and any of that stuff, or feminist theory. But it did disturb me at the time, and I knew we had problems. Professor Emma Renold from Cardiff University. Dr. Leanne Call from DCU worked with her for a year on the Welsh RSE programme. And the Welsh RSE programme is pretty horrendous. It's very explicit. We know the people in Wales, we work with them. And she was also kind of a consultant. She came over to do some class work as part of the DCU course. And look at this, queering childhood involves not just queering sex and gender, but also the generational binaries, adult, child, sex rules, asexual. You know what she's referring to there, right? Underage sex, intergenerational sex. Here's the two big guidelines, the WHO one and the UNESCO one. And this one here, the WHO one, talks about children self-pleasuring in the 0 to 4 age group and discovering their gender identity, and the 9-year-olds having their first sexual experience. No. So, the critical turn in education. This is so important because this tells you when educational scholarship is a scholarship of teaching, became leftist Marxist. Now this is America, so this is referring specifically to America. This will be 40 years ago in America. This critical turn in education. It's happened in Ireland now. So I'm not sure exactly when it happened, probably 10 to 15 years ago in Ireland. And it basically, you see the term social justice coming in there. So basically all of the educational scholarship is hard left now. It's critical or queer. And the word critical is the watchword. So when you see things like a critical analysis or critical literacy and that term used, it means you're going to look at everything through this Marxist critical lens of oppressor and oppressor and the whole power relations aspect of it, which is a very narrow lens because it doesn't allow nuance. It doesn't allow any nuance. We had the issue of the Irina, the Ukrainian girl killed on the train, which the mainstream media did not cover it. I don't know if people in this room have even seen it. She was brutally murdered on a train, this young Ukrainian in America. And see, the issue we had there was they were two oppressed groups. She was oppressed. She was a migrant. She was a woman, and he was oppressed as a man of color, etc. And because he had mental problems. Like again, he was being oppressed because he had mental problems. That's the nuance. That's reality. With this critical theory stuff, it's black and white. There's a narrative, and you have to follow it. Pedagogy, the way of teaching. So critical pedagogy is this philosophy of education that applies the concepts of critical theory to the field of education. It insists that issues of social justice and democracy are not distinct from the acts of teaching and learning. So basically politicizes your education. And you can be using critical theory, critical pedagogy as the way you teach every subject in the curriculum. And that's what's happening now. And I'll show you references to it in some books. And queer pedagogy is kind of a superset of this. It's just focused more on gender and sex and as forms of oppression as well. And it just brings that stuff into the curriculum. This has a huge bearing on the classroom experience. Dr. Jones, Irwin of DCU in 2018, he did a speech. They were doing the curriculum development at the time, and he did a speech towards a values-led redevelopment of the primary curriculum. And he said that the curriculum should define the pertinent values to be fostered in students and the ways in which those values would be taught. Critical pedagogy, whole school approach, right? So that's what he was referring to. And he does make references to critical activities and every subject area, which was the whole school approach. So basically he's saying what values and how we teach it. And those values are the values of critical theory, the values of the United Nations, as we now know. So that's what he was alluding to, and there it is. So he's telling us. And so in a critical pedagogical approach, the emphasis is placed on the students developing the capacity and motivation to transform their social and political environment rather than on learning subject-based knowledge. In fact, it's more important to do the other stuff, the social justice stuff, the climate stuff, and forget anything else about learning anything else. The first priority is that stuff, and the second priority is actually learning a subject. That's the problem. And that's a particularly a problem for young learners, because we're talking about the primary curriculum. 5-year-olds, who's still learning English and basic mathematics. Critical pedagogy. This book was referenced in the research documents for the primary curriculum. And the main point I want to highlight here is the point regarding the countries. So he talks about, it's critical theory. It's basically talking about critical pedagogy, and they're going to use critical theory. And then he makes this comment about the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the nations of the European Union. The nations that are under attack, as we know, Western civilization. These are the nations of Western civilization that are being attacked by critical theory and cultural Marxism. And so he calls them, they're problematically democratic and free. Well, I actually kind of agree with that. Right now, we don't have a democracy in Ireland anymore. We don't have a media that will report on anything controversial. And we don't have any choice at election time. to the point that we had to go and spoil our votes a couple of weeks ago because we had nobody to vote for. So he's actually right, but that's not what he means. What they're really doing here is attacking. They want children to feel that their countries are oppressive, fundamentally, and that they need to be change agents for social transformation. Use that term. So Paulo Freire, he's the guy who authors the books on critical pedagogy, and they refer to him, the NCCA referred to him, and he was covered on the DCU course. This is the problem. Developing critical consciousness and social transformation, you're going to forget about the foundational learning and knowledge. This is the dumbing down of the curriculum. You have to dumb down the curriculum if you're going to bring this stuff in. You can't have the two. You have to give the time. They talked about that video about Stalin, where they were doing 40% of their time on communist indoctrination stuff. It's at least that with what's happening now. It's at least that we're wasting. And think of all the lost opportunity for children there. It engages students in complex discussions about power, privilege, and social justice. For a 5-6-year-old, God help us. Like, they're just learning to read. And then the risk of being used as a tool for ideological indoctrination, and that's obviously the nub of it. So it politicizes students, indoctrinates them in Marxist and woke ideologies, replacing learning with a focus on radical activism. And here it is, in the NCCA strategic plan, so no surprise. They say that they want Irish children to develop as responsible, resilient and compassionate actors for social justice, climate action, sustainability and equality. Right? So it's planned. This is not accidental or anything like that. It's built in there. And here we have the Cinealtas program I've talked about, which basically enshrines gender ideology in policy. Now we're spending a small fortune on a whole raft of NGOs to create the training material and teacher training material and school classroom material for this. And one of them this is just one example. I think of a couple more on another slide. The Take One program. And if you look up there, see it, every student, every subject, every class. So you're going to be engaging in this education for sustainable development in every class. Like, what's happening to the subjects? I thought I was going to learn history. I thought I was going to learn geography. No, I'm going to be learning about the United Nations SDGs instead. It's stealing kids in education. That's the problem with it. And here are two more of them here. Irish Development Education Associations here. There's Vision 2025 towards a society of global citizens. Global citizenship education, GCE they call it. And then educating for an equal world. Like, this is United Nations indoctrination. It really is. Full-scale indoctrination. Globalist indoctrination. And here we go. This is the UNESCO website and talking about the global citizenship education topics and learning objectives. And none of it's surprising. It's all the same stuff. So we'll move on. So I give examples there. So this was our feedback to the NCCA and the primary curriculum, that it wasn't fit to proceed on any basis. I went through it in detail. We spent weeks at it. We had a whole team. We went through all the documents. It was outrageous. We didn't hold back on the feedback. This is the words we gave back to them. We had a whole pit. We gave detail as well. We said significant changes are required, including stepping back from this education for social justice woke agenda, blatant attempt at political indoctrination, psychological and emotional harm to the affected children, as well as stealing their education. And they said it's a shocking testimony with regard to how the NCCA is now prioritising politics and activism over child welfare. And I'll stand by that as much today, and even more so, because we didn't even know quite how bad it was going to be. And here's a book, Teaching for Social Justice and Sustainable Development Across the Primary Curriculum. And here's a quote from page 2. More recently, they talk about radical educational philosophies of social transformation, such as those associated with the work of Paulo Freire, the guy we had over there a few minutes ago, have revolutionized how we think about the nature of education and its role in challenging inequality. You see, they're coming back to this thing. We have to bring in equality, inclusion, all that stuff. And he talks about, look at this. This is really frightening. This publication is premised on the view that education is inherently political. They're basically telling you on page 2 of what they're going to be promoting. And then when you look at the table of contents, it's critical inquiry, a pedagogy for social justice and sustainability, a critical historical inquiry, climate change, creative and relational approaches to social justice, arts education for social justice and sustainability, connecting social justice with teaching of music. Every subject basically is being corrupted. So we'll skip through that one. Another book, Teaching for the Sustainable Development Goals, Young Citizens 10 to 16. Now you might think that sustainable development, yeah, okay, well, I mightn't fully agree with all the climate stuff, but it's just sustainable development. Oh no, here we go, SDG 5, gender equality, teaching about gender, feminist hope and praxis for the future, right? Oh dear, gender ideology in this book on sustainable development. There we go, Sealer talks about a feminist praxis describes gender identity, transgender, and you saw that definition before, our deeply felt internal experience of our own gender identity. So something that you thought was just going to be sustainable development actually has the whole gender stuff in it. What's the Catholic Church's view? Dignitas Infinita 2024, unambiguous in terms of what it says about gender ideology. And it basically says that we cannot separate the masculine and the feminine from God's work. And it's unambiguous. And we did a whole video on Pope Francis on gender theory. And he made multiple public statements on gender theory. And there was both Dignitas Infinita, and there was another book, a male, female, he created them. There was another paper that came from the Vatican. And it's absolutely unambiguous. So here we go. There's this Divini Redemptoris, 1937, the encyclical of Pope Pius on atheistic communism. So my assertion right now is we are dealing with a modern day version of atheistic communism. And you'll see when you hear what he writes here. He said, the communism of today, more emphatically than similar movements in the past, conceals in itself a false messianic idea, a pseudo-ideal of justice, of equality and fraternity in labour, impregnates all its doctrine and activity with a deceptive mysticism which communicates a zealous and contagious enthusiasm to the multitudes entrapped by delusive promises. It's actually very well worded, and I think it's very applicable to what we're dealing with. He goes on to say, the most urgent need of the present day is therefore the energetic and timely application of remedies which will effectively ward off the catastrophe that daily grows more threatening. I mean, it's frightening. The words are frightening, actually. We cherish the firm hope that the fanaticism with which the sons of darkness work day and night at their materialistic and atheistic propaganda will at least serve the holy purpose of stimulating the sons of light to a like and even greater zeal for the honour of the Divine Majesty. It's so true. And this is a warning to any of the faithful. See to it, venerable brethren, that the faithful do not allow themselves to be deceived. Communism is intrinsically wrong, and no one who would save Christian civilization may collaborate with it in any undertaking whatsoever. So replace communism with woke ideology. Those who permit themselves to be deceived into lending their aid towards the triumph of communism in their own country will be the first to fall victims of their error. Now, there's a lot of very good content in this. I'm only giving you a few little snapshots. Again, we'll have a link to this. You can download it. But some of the consequences for all ages, this loss of rational critical thinking, loss of individuality and personal autonomy, succumbing to the collectivist woke groupthink. Your life becomes driven by collectivist-inspired narratives than objective truth. You become vulnerable then to ideological and collectivist control. So you're no longer a kind of free-thinking individual. You're just going to follow the crowd everywhere. And what was the last one? Reduced foundational learning, we've seen that, and impaired cognitive development, which is a consequence because you're not engaging properly in your classroom learning. Increased stress and mental health. You saw the girl at the start there, she's talking about climate change and what am I going to do, and am I a racist, am I a different gender, or what am I? The poor kids, their mental health has gone through the floor with this stuff. And then you see a lot of boys now reject this. So we get the feedback from teachers that boys in the schools reject this. And then, they're misogynists. We have to actually indoctrinate. We need to actually pile on them even more because they're showing their male privilege. This the feminist thing, right? So you're actually the boys are showing hate and all this when they reject this stuff. Well, the development of narcissistic personality traits. There's two papers that talk about this: the narcissism of woke, you can see it. I mean, you've probably experienced it already. And then the inability to tolerate or engage in any way with alternative viewpoints. That's covered in that book about the indoctrinated brain, the reasons why, the pathological reasons why that is the case, because it's grounded in science, why you get into that state when you've been indoctrinated so heavily. And then the inability to empathize or tolerate anyone holding alternative views. And that can lead to the dehumanization of those people. There was a quick video clip we showed from Charlie Kirk. It was a couple of weeks before he was assassinated.
Turning Point USA chapter was set to host Brandon Tatum as a Prove Me Wrong event. Goes up, sets a table. Anyone can go and have free speech and dialogue if they disagree. Antifa showed up, full masked. Black outfits. They came in, took our gear, destroyed our tables, basically made the students had to flee, and the police did nothing to intervene, nothing whatsoever. Our courageous students had such resolve and fortitude that after this incident happened, they regathered and tried to do the event still about an hour later, but it wasn't the same, of course. This is after one of our Turning Point USA students at University of Texas, Dallas, had a bike lock thrown at her and actually had to be hospitalized for this treatment. Sean, we are seeing seeing a disturbing pattern from the radical left, and we have data to now support it. According to the National Contagion Research Institute, 48% of left-of-center respondents say that it's justified to murder Elon Musk. 53% say that it would be justified to murder President Donald Trump. There are ballot measures in California that are being measured by far-left activists that are being named, I should say, after Luigi Maggioni. We have to take a step back here and ask our question, what's really going on here? There's a deeper thing than just political disagreement. If you are on the front lines, like our Turning Point USA students, you are potentially putting your safety, your well-being, and God forbid, your life in jeopardy for simply being a conservative on a college campus.
And then this radicalization, and that then leads to psychotic behavior and violent, like it's really bad in the US. Antifa, and there's militant queers. There's an organization called Militant Queers, who basically are queers who are armed, you know, and they're protecting trans people and fighting fascists. That would be their kind of view, right? And it just leads into violence, and it gets to very bad. Relationship challenges, breakups of friendships, family, reduced employability, and career prospects. Would you hire one of these people? No. They're going to come in and start running marches around the factory floor or your office areas and getting people out to be activists for climate change or trans rights or something. And then reduce quality of life choices. Like, these people could end up in their 50s looking back and saying, God, I never got married. I never, you know, I had chances, and I know I rejected all of that because it's misogynist. I wanted to stay away from men or whatever. And I don't have a family or anything. And regretting that. Or that they may have actually engaged in surgeries and stuff and shortened their life as well. And then the opportunity cost. Like, this is the real sad thing. Like, what could they have done if they'd actually had a proper education and made proper life choices? And think of what we could be doing in universities today if half the university wasn't engaged in woke scholarship, as I call it. Like, we're wasting billions right now in Ireland on this stuff because all the NGOs, right? Over 6 billion on woke NGOs pushing their agenda. And this is the other thing from a faith perspective. This loss of national, religious and cultural identity, anti-Christian mindset. And for some people, they'll lose their faith altogether. I mean, ultimately what they wanted to do in Russia, and what people like John Dewey in America, for people who may not know him, he was a guy who was involved in the progressive education, as they call it in America. He wanted to de-Christianize American education. That was his number one priority. He was a humanist, but he was a communist as well. They call him a collectivist, but I would say communist. And he actually engaged with the Frankfurt School and all those critical Marxist guys, right? He didn't want children in school to know God at all, to get any knowledge of God. Think about that. Because then you can control them. See, that's why communists don't want people to have any faith in religion. They don't want an alternative to the power and control of the government. So they have to wash the religion out of you. They have to wash your national pride, your loyalty to family. They have to get rid of all those things. So what comes to pass does so not so much because a few people want it to happen as because the mass of citizens abdicate the responsibility and let things be. Now, it's ironic it's Antonio Gramsci, the Marxist, that is saying this statement, but you know what I'm saying, right? How many people do you know? So that's the rallying cry. You can't be afraid that somebody's going to call you far right or a bigot or hateful or any of those tropes, the cultural Marxist tropes that they'll throw at you.
So call to action. It's not all doom and gloom because we can do something about it. And we have done a lot. We've got library books moved. We've got parents on the move. We've got people challenging the schools, meeting with principals. But we realized in the Natural Women's Council, we had hundreds of emails coming in. I read them all every night through the night. Parents saying, where do I start? I just found your group. Something's not right in school. So we said we need to do a better job supporting parents with what to do and where to get the info. So we're launching our campaign called Connected. So if you go to naturalwomen'scouncil.com, it's right on the front page, on the hero page. You just click Learn More. Brings you right to this page here. And there's the Connected guide, which we developed. The scope was 5 pages, but it grew legs. We've been working on it since April or May before the summer. And it's a 20-page guide, and it has, message from myself in the front. Then we have a message from McEntee. She stated that gender ideology is not in the curriculum, but it's in the policy. So she completely told lies, and we've called her out. We dedicated a whole page there to her. So there's a whole page here, and then if you look at it online, you'll actually have hyperlinks in there. So when you're looking through it, you'll see something underlined in bold. You can click it and it brings you to a document for further info. So this is like the education for parents, grandparents, and guardians to know what's in school. Get Connect Ed. And there's also a letter to send to your public reps, your schools, anyone you want to send this letter to. We sent it 2 weeks ago to every TD, minister, senator, children's ombudsman, TUSLA, and all the schools. We sent it to thousands of schools in Ireland. They have our letter to say no more of this. We demand that this all stops now. There's also a campaign leaflet. This is the leaflet. So the front of the leaflet, do you know what's happening in your child's school? This is the inside with 8 points of concern. And then on the back is the call to action and the little QR code, which scans right into the Connect Ed campaign that we just showed you. So everybody can pass thousands of leaflets on the street. Father Chris Hayden, who's a spiritual director at Maynooth, wrote this fantastic leaflet back in 2021. It doesn't have a date on it, but it might as well be today because we're seeing it. So we've left a few of these he's brought with him today. It's time to start asking questions. Children are now in the crosshairs of the sexual revolution, and it's a great document there that Father Chris Hayden brought. So thanks for that. So I would just ask really the one thing people always say, well, what can I do to get involved? It's help pass out leaflets. Contact us if you can do an info session in your area. Doesn't have to be one like this, doesn't have to be a big conference. You could have 5 people over to your dining room table and have a conversation. Walk through the Connect Ed guide. Look at some of the books. The other thing I always say is have 5 a day. That's not just for your health, that's 5 a day. I was in the barber shop with my little boy. Bunch of moms there. 2 years ago, they probably would have looked the other way. And I said, oh, what do you think about what's happening in schools? Few blank stares. I said, oh, you haven't seen the information? Like, really? No, they're teaching boys they can be girls and girls they can be boys and pronouns and all this stuff from the genderbread person. Again, they looked shocked. And I said, oh, I actually have one of the books with me. And I actually pulled out a book and a leaflet. By the end of that 5-minute conversation, those 5 mummies said, can you pass leaflets out at my school gate? There you go. Once you get it on that kind of micro level, you make these big chats, break them down into that small chat. You can very quickly, at the queue in the grocery store, I start talking to the mummies, the barbershop, church, wherever, just never stop talking, 5 a day, 5 conversations a day, quick ones. So that's really the call to action. You can send us a message as well. We want to get people in every county to help with leaflets. If you want to pass out leaflets or be the person in your area to be the point person, just send us an email through the website. Also, if you can subscribe to our website, naturalwomenscouncil.com, you can join and subscribe. We'll make sure we send newsletters with different updates and campaigns so everyone can stay connected. So I hope you found it helpful. I know we ran over because we had a lot of deep, heavy information, but hopefully you found it helpful to see what's happening. It is daunting, but it's real. It's really important that you know what's happening. It's better to be in the know because then you can do something about it.
The foundations of a nation are built in the home and reinforced in the classroom. When families fracture and education is captured by radical ideologies, children lose their anchor. What is taught as progress today may become confusion tomorrow. The consequences will not be theoretical, they will be generational. Thank you for following this 3-part exploration of the agenda targeting children. You'll find links to part 1 and 2 along with full reference materials in the description below. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe so we can spread awareness and stand up for women, children, and families here in Ireland and further afield.